Remember November? Mysterious drones operating with impunity over America and worldwide.
Now, a senior British official confirmed to Fox that the UK has deployed about 60 troops, including counter-drone specialists, to help determine who is behind this and to help defend the air bases amid fears it's a potential coordinated operation.
The Biden administration plays it down.
It's entirely possible that it could be hobbyists or something else. We just got to look into it.
2025 brings in a new president and a response to the drones.
The drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons. Many of these drones were also hobbyists, recreational, and private individuals that enjoy flying drones.
Is the White House being transparent? And what about next time? The UAP Disclosure Fund Public Safety Working Group weighs in. Let's get to it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Good Trouble Show. I'm Matt Ford. The end of 2024 was marked by seemingly unending reports of drones worldwide that did not seem to be, well, sort of acting or operating like regular drones. The year prior, these mystery drones were operating with impunity over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, forcing the United States Air Force to move an entire wing of F-22 fighters to another location. While public reports of the mystery drones have virtually disappeared, a former Pentagon official told the Good Trouble Show off the record that mysterious drone incursions are continuing to occur over the United States military bases, albeit at a lower rate and without anywhere near the operational impact the 2023 Langley incident had. Today, an expert panel joins us to discuss these incidents, what we can possibly expect in the near future, and how public safety officials should prepare. But first, please hit the subscribe and thumbs up buttons on YouTube. Do us a favor, leave a comment, and let us know what you think about this episode. We always love reading the comments. You can also find us on X at Good Trouble Show. Let's see, we're there. Yep. And everywhere else at The Good Trouble Show. And you can always find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. And if you want to chip in to keep the lights on, we always appreciate that. You can become a Patreon member of The Good Trouble Show by going to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. Sign up and you can support this work. Also, super chats are also open today since we are live, and they are a great way to lend your financial support that allows us to bring you excellent guests like we have today. Now, with that out of the way, we are live, so please post your questions for our panelists in all caps in the chat. And speaking of the chat, a big shout out to our team of Good Trouble Show moderators who are keeping the trolls away. Without the moderators, we would not have chat. So before we bring in our speakers, I want to kind of set up the show today as I nearly knocked my mouse off the table here. Today's format will be a little bit different. And the thing I want to say is that we are not here today to talk about hobbyist drones operated by individuals or companies or the FAA if they're operating drones, which I don't think they are. We are talking about vehicles that are often reported as spheres or drones the size of an SUV, demonstrating behavior that our state-of-the-art just does not have. And we're also going to talk about the need for better transparency from the federal government. I mean, not only, for the public, because, we all, of course, deserve to know what is going on above our skies, but especially for local and state authorities. This gaslighting that we've seen, certainly from the previous administration, and possibly from this one as well, in terms of gaslighting local and state officials, it's just not cool. And then the final thing I want to note is that this has been going on for a very, very long time. The Pentagon, the folks in the Pentagon and previous administrations, hopefully again we'll see a change with the Trump administration, but the Pentagon, the CIA, the intelligence community, they always want you to think that this is something new, that it's like, oh, we're going to figure out what these drones are. We're going to deploy some sensors and we'll get to the bottom of it. You saw and you heard that multiple times from, John Kirby, who worked for the Biden administration, sort of the Pentagon spokesperson. But it was all that same sort of BS that they continued to shovel, which is they want all of you at home to think this is something new. They've never seen it before. They're as confused by it as you. They're going to get to the bottom of it. Well, folks, that is just a load of horseshit. Quite frankly, this has been going on literally for decades. On our program today, we have the former chief of police, Chris Grooms, who him and many other law enforcement officers in Ord, Nebraska in 2019, 2020 had hordes of these drones flying around. So it's definitely just a line of horse manure that the government is trying to sell you when they act like this is some kind of surprise and we don't know where it's from, but it's probably FAA drones, anyway. So anyway, as many of you know, when I'm not hosting the Good Trouble Show, I volunteer as the director of strategy for the UAP Disclosure Fund. Our organization is a nonpartisan nonprofit supporting UAP legislation, protecting whistleblowers, and raising public awareness for greater transparency. Our amazing team that we have at UAPDF has some familiar names. Everyone at home might know. Yuan Fung, our executive director. We have Dr. Gary Nolan, Lou Elizondo, Colonel Carl Nell, Jordan Flowers, former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intelligence, Christopher Mellon, retired Navy Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, and Kirk McConnell, who was worked for Senate Armed Services Committee, and Attorney Dylan Guthrie. Last month, UAPDF sponsored a town hall led by the UAPDF Public Safety Working Group to discuss the drone issue. And it is my pleasure today to welcome this group back to the show. So let's see here, make sure we got all the audio on. So below me, we have Sean Grosvenor, who will serve as my co-host for today. We'll talk about that in a second. Sean is a forensic consultant who spent 25 years at the Illinois State Police. On the top right there, your top right, we have investigator and author Richard Lang, whose book, A First Responder's Guide to UFO Encounters, offers a guide for handling UAP incidents. On the middle right, we are joined by more friends of the show, Gerry and John Tedesco. They are founders of Nightcrawler Research. These two researchers are just doing amazing work, and we have some exclusive footage of what kind of some drone stuff, UAP that they encountered off the coast of Long Island. We'll show a little bit later in the show. And let's see, finally, who do we have? We have returning to the show the former chief of police of Ord, Nebraska, former chief of Nebraska. Well, I can't talk today. I'm all tongue-tied. The former chief of police of Ord, Nebraska, Chris Grooms. So, guys, thanks for joining us. How is everyone?
Good. Very good.
Very
Very
good.
good.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, great. So as I said, this is a little bit of a different format. I saw the town hall and said, you know what, we got to get all these experts on. The town hall that you guys appeared on the UAPDF channel on YouTube was just fantastic. And Sean, now of course I'd met everyone else, but I had never come across you before, and I thought this guy's incredible at hosting these things. You were asking just incredible questions, so I thought to myself, you know what? This is a Sunday. I'm gonna kind of relax a bit, and since we have you on, and we know that you're a great host from watching the town hall last time, I thought, hey, let's co-host this thing. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and then I'll sort of pop in here and there with questions, hopefully some questions from the audience. And again, folks in the audience, if you have any questions, we encourage you to put them in the chat. Please put them in all caps so we don't miss them there. And before we actually kick this off, and I hand this off to you, Sean, what better way to set up today's discussion than a clip from our friend Ross Coulthart on News Nation? Let's watch.
Not consistent with normal drone technology, and the government's very quick attempt to try and ludicrously explain away the drones by saying they were part of some government research project has only added fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories. Because a lot of people are still seeing these drones. A lot of these drones are still showing themselves over government facilities, particularly military bases. And all it's doing, there's a lot said about conspiracy theories that they may not be true, but often the attempt to dismiss those conspiracy theories by either ignoring them, playing them down, or disinforming about them plays up to those conspiracy theories. And that's certainly what the government's doing at the moment. The absolutely ludicrous, laughable government response made by a White House press commentator who said that the drones flap that's occurred for the last few months was simply a government research project and also other reasons, unspecified reasons, is ridiculous. And all it's done, I think, is fuel public speculation of conspiracies like Project Bluebeam. Frankly, I don't think Project Bluebeam's true. I don't see any evidence at all, and I talk to a lot of people in NASA, that NASA could even possibly be involved in such a conspiracy. But I do think that it's not outside the realm of possibility, I suppose, that there are some forces in the dark state, the deep state, that might take it upon themselves to essentially do something with technology that they've been concealing from the American public. But I don't see any evidence of that at the moment.
All right, well, there you go. Our good friend Ross Coulthart, who does amazing work on News Nation, and his just fantastic show on Reality Check. So Sean, I'm going to hand this off to you. And again, folks watching at home, please post your questions in all caps. And everyone, welcome to the show.
All right, thanks, Matt. On the show, this was a great team to work with. We're going to have a little bit of additional information for you today, which is why we are joining with the same team. So today we're going to discuss some important things. The importance of coordinating a response between first responders, technical specialists, investigators in support of resolving unidentified threats to public infrastructure and private property. Developing standard procedures, training, and equipment is essential for effective public safety response to unidentified threat incidents. What is you, the public, what can you do to assist public safety when observing unknown drones? And of course, we need to focus on the importance of evidence. So as we watch today, I'm going to ask you to really consider how you would handle an incident where you went outside and saw one of these in the sky. So at this time, I would like to introduce Chris Grooms, who is a former chief of Ord PD, Nebraska. At the time of these unknown drone incursions in 2019 and 2020, he was a deputy with the Valley County Sheriff's Office. Chris, thank you for your service. We appreciate you being with us again today. A quick rundown of your specific encounters that you had with these unidentified drones, your response, and what the outcome was.
Thanks for having me.
So if you can give us a breakdown of how you became a on incursions and what did you actually experience? Give us a view of what you saw that day.
Yeah, so we obviously had seen that there was some drone activity that was going on in Colorado. We didn't think much of it at the time, but then they started showing up around here, around the Valley County area. And Valley County is about a 568 square mile county, but we have less population than we do, cattle and horses. We have a population of about 4,500 people. So there's not a lot of activity out here that would involve airplanes, helicopters, even drones. We don't have a drone, hobbyist group out here doing stuff. It's just very rare and random that we have activity like that around here. And in 2019, December 2019, these things started moving into our area. And when they showed up, we started getting 911 calls to the sheriff's office, to the local PD. And in that time, it lasted about 14 to 17 days, a little bit longer. If you look at other counties' incidents that happened as well, because it wasn't just isolated to us. It was numerous counties in both directions, east, north, south, west, even up to 100 miles from us. They were seeing the same stuff as we were at the same time on the same nights. So it was very coordinated, not hobbyists, not government activity. We looked into all that stuff. But as far as what I saw at the individual level, the first night would have been around the 24th of December of 2019. My sheriff, who actually received the call, called me and asked me to come support him so we could figure out what this thing was and what it was doing. Well, I headed south down Highway 11 to go link up with him near Davis Creek Reservoir, which is where this thing was close to. It was about a mile west of the Davis Creek Reservoir. So as I was heading towards the sheriff, I noticed some reddish green lights in the sky, and they were, I'd say 6 to 8 feet apart, but it was a reddish green light and they were kind of blinking, and it was just out there hovering all by itself in the middle of nowhere. And the sheriff had tried to make contact with it initially, and that's why he called me to come help him. So as we started to pursue it, we were in our vehicles, our patrol vehicles. This thing, every time that we would try and move closer to it, it would move away from us, but it always paralleled the roads. It always moved in a way that we couldn't get to it or get better eyes on it, but it never got away from us to where we couldn't see it. It obviously knew we were there, and as we would pursue it down the gravel roads, it would move in a direction that we couldn't get close enough to it, but it would stay near the roads.
So I got a question. So given that you were within a proximity to have eyes on this, were you able to get any information regarding the size, the shape, any distinguishing features? We've talked a lot about these drone incursions happening over the last several years, and now we have a response from our these are approved flights by hobbyists. So what can you tell us about distinguishing features of these objects that you saw that don't conform to that?
Well, the first night that I witnessed one personally, I couldn't get close enough to it to tell if there was a fixed wing or if it was some form of a quadcopter or anything like that. It was just the two reddish green lights. But I can tell you that as close as we could get to it, which was maybe within 400 feet, somewhere around there, there was no noise. There was no noise that would tell us that it was a drone or anything like that. The other night that I witnessed, which would have been about a week later, there was absolutely no signs to it whatsoever that it was a drone, due to it was just a big ball, bright light in the sky. And the distance that it covered from the north to my location to the south was about 3/4 of a mile. And it covered that distance in about 2 to 4 seconds. And it wasn't very high in the sky. It was 150 feet. And the reason I knew that was because I referenced off the co-op tower where it was coming from. So I knew roughly the height of the object. And then as far as the size, when it passed in front of me, right in front of my windshield, from one side of the light to the other side of the light, I estimated to be about the size of my pickup truck. And at that time, I was driving a Ram 1500 crew cab pickup. So it was fairly large. At least the light was anyways. But the amount of, the 2 to 4 seconds that it took to cover that distance, I'm not familiar with drones that can cover that distance that quickly, and that there was no noise again. The only thing that I saw that maybe gave it some type of fixed object was it had contrails behind it. And those contrails stayed, as it passed by me, the contrails stayed there. When it finally disappeared away from me to where I could no longer see it, when I looked back to see if there was those contrails were still there, they were gone. But that night I don't feel like it was a drone just by the bright light that it was. It was a reddish orange light. How fast it went, the no noise. Yeah, it was so odd, and it still boggles my mind to this day.
So, and what you describe is pretty sensational. How many drones did you see at any given time? Did they appear the same, or were they different in some way?
Well, some nights in our county, we would see upwards of 50, and they would move in formations, whether they were in a huge, diamond shaped formation or flying in a wedge. A deputy, the sheriff, and a off-duty state trooper all counted anywhere between 40 and 50. And the 40 to 50 of them were basically surrounding a small town in my county called Arcadia, which is a town of about 600 people. And they were just there. They were just hovering over the town, doing whatever it was that they were doing. And eventually they just flew off. And, I'll go back and just say that every night that these things showed up for that 14 to 17 days, we never tracked where they were coming from. And we never tracked where they went. And that wasn't just our county. It was multiple counties coordinating together at the local law enforcement level to try and get a fix on these things.
So, and I want to go into a little bit more of that as we talk about the tracking. This is very important because, as taxpayers, we pay for a lot of resources to maintain the security of our nation and globally, actually. What steps were taken to gather the evidence that would demonstrate to our government agencies and the public what this was, as far as any photo, video evidence, anything that that might have been deposited?
Well, I mean, we did have videos from people, and it was this, it was just a big bright light in the sky, and we had witness testimony, sworn statements. I could have had more sworn statements from people, but there was just so many people that were unwilling to put their name out there, in the sworn statements. They just would refuse to fill them out. But we coordinated with all the other law enforcement agencies in the local area, calls to service, the 911 logs, reaching out to federal agencies, the FBI, the state patrol. There was just all sorts of different ways that we tried to figure out what it was. And it was always the same thing of, well, that's not us. We're not doing that. We don't know what it is. We reached out to survey companies that maybe were doing something with GPSs. We did our due diligence. I mean, we even reached out to Facebook to see if they were doing something. And it was all the same. Nope, that's not us. Nope, we're not doing that.
So during your response, did you experience, what other observations did you have as far as any effects on the environment? Did you, was there any heat signatures? Did you feel any heat from the object? Was there any sort of disruption to any electronic devices? Anything that beyond what you could see?
No, I never experienced anything that was hot or burned. None of my electronics ever shut off. Our radios always worked. We could communicate through our cell phones. And none of the other local populace ever, reached out to us to say, hey, this thing burned me, or I could feel heat or anything like that. We never had any of that. We did have some other weird stuff though. Ranchers calling in saying that these things are hovering in their pastures, shining big bright lights down on their cattle or their horses and disturbing their cattle or their horses. We never had any calls about cattle mutilations or anything like that. But at one point, there was a few days, they weren't all together. They were kind of broken up, but there was a few days where we had different ranchers that had called either me personally or the office to say, hey, this white light, bright light in the sky was shining something down on my cattle. It scared them. I had to go out at 4 a.m. to get accountability of them. It just irritated them. They wanted to know what it was. So,
to your knowledge, was there any property damage or injury to anyone or any of the cattle? Or
nope, never had any reports of that.
what about the demand on government resources to your local jurisdiction? You describe your community as a ranching community. It sounds like a very peaceful, quiet community, something that would be a high level known technology to dedicate resources to. What demand did this place on your community in terms of response? How many officers approximately responded? What was the nature of this response in terms of resources?
Well, for my county alone, there was at the time 5 full-time deputies and sheriff, and then there was either three or four board police department officers, including the chief. And we obviously work different shifts than other guys, but typically on a night where this would be going on, I would say about 2 to 3 of us would respond just in my county. But some of the other counties were having 1 or 2 guys or gals out at the same time dealing with their stuff in their county. So there was a few of us, for as small of a population as we are, there was a few of us out every night trying to observe these things or collect data or anything like that.
At any time, were you notified of any specific exercises or additional activities that would be expected to be notified to your agency that, hey, don't get all up in arms about this. There are these exercises going on or tests. Any sort of notification that might have aligned with these observations?
Nope. Offutt Air Force Base, which is out at Omaha, they're fairly large base. They have jets and C-130s and stuff like that flying in and out of there all the time. But when we reached out to them, it was, nope, that's not us. We're not doing that. We don't know what it is. So we kind of ruled them out. The FBI told us, nope, that's not us. We're not doing that. Even the state patrol, we reached out to them, and we do have state troopers in this area, but we reached out to the command and they said, no, we don't have that capability. We're not doing that. I think at one point we talked to the FAA and they said, no, that's not us. We're not doing that. So we reached out to a lot of different agencies.
So as you're responding to this series of incidents and you're reaching out to these agencies, you have what seems to be ill-equipped to address an incident like this. I mean, the police agencies respond to incidents on the ground, and here you have an aerial incident. So what kind of challenges did you face when trying to interface with other agencies as far as communication, information sharing, resources? What are some of the challenges that you faced?
Well, a lot of it was just, the lack of what we were receiving from the federal government. The agencies around here, we have fairly sophisticated technology to do our job. But as far as anything that's aerial, we don't have the typical thermals or night vision or anything like that. Every officer doesn't have that. We'd have to go to our SWAT team guys to get that stuff. So that definitely was a problem, was being able to use any type of thermals or night vision at any given time to try and get eyes on these things, to at least figure out what type of structure there was to it. As far as the communication side of it goes, we did communicate a lot with other surrounding agencies, either by cell phone or radio. But anytime that we would communicate and say, hey, can you go sit up on this hill? This thing is kind of moving in that direction towards you guys over in your county. They would go set up over there, and they'd have 10 power binos or whatever to try and see lights in the sky or whatever, and they would disappear. I don't know if that meant they shut the lights off or some other crazy technology. I don't know, but we just could never triangulate where they were going or where they came from. It was just so random.
So, so going back on your response here, I know it's been some time. If this were to happen again, what additional resources would you ask for if you were in charge of responding to this incident? What would you say? Hey, we absolutely need these resources, these personnel, this equipment. We need to set up, in these locations to get a beat on this. What would you ask for?
I would definitely ask the federal government to help us, give us some answers. But as far as equipment, we could use some thermals, we could use some night vision. Communication wise, we got great radios. We have a good radio system. We have a great regional dispatch center. Cell phones, obviously, they work. So that was a quick way for us to talk. But I would definitely say just being able to get eyes on these things with those thermals or their night visions. So if they did go dark or shut their lights off, at least hopefully we could pick them up with some type of thermal imaging, and that might help us track them a little bit better.
I'd actually like to, I was going through while you guys were chatting here. Chris, a while back, sent something like, I think it's almost close to like 40 or more calls to service. Now, these are the kind of 911 call records, and I thought that I would read some here because I think it really illustrates how prolific this particular drone event was. And so, yeah, I'm just going to go through some of them here. Let's see. So this was from let's see. January 13th of 2020. Call details, and I'm going to leave the officers' names out, and of course the person who made the call. But this officer said about 10 minutes ago, 8 drones flew over his property heading west. So that's one. Another one here, saw a cluster of bright lights to the southwest of her house. This was on January 7th, 2020. Let's see. West of Dodge and 16th, cluster of 15 drones. On, let's see, January 7th, a drone hovering over house. And lists the caller, saw about 4 to 5 hours ago when she complained. Let's see, Ashley Furniture, above Ashley Furniture stores, see drones southeast 3 to 4 miles. Another person called, says he is seeing 3 small and 1 large drone over Maxwell. I don't know if that's a street. Another person on January 7th, 6 drones. Caller and his girlfriend said they saw them. Yellow and different colored lights northwest of airport near highway is another call. Drones over house, 20 of them happened 45 minutes ago. Majority went east, others went north. Another one here on January 2nd, 2020, Hershey 2 drones near the canal. Saw drones, 1 west of Sutherland, 1 west of North Platte. Let's see here, looking for some other ones. Looks like 1 is north of Miller Road. This was again on January 7th. Solid white light that's been there for 5 minutes west of highway, maybe moving east. And again, folks, these are the calls to service, and maybe after I go through some of these, we'll have Chris tell us exactly what calls to service are. But I mean, these are, it's the number of them is insane. 1 drone approximately 40 feet in the air called in by a police officer. That's pretty low. Another call, 10 to 20 drones flying 1,000 feet in the air around Highway 83. Complaint has a complainant there. Another call, 6 to 7 drones overhead between Wellfleet and Dickens. Drone sighting about 20 minutes ago. It's unreal, the number of them. I'm just going to kind of quick skim through some of these others. Here's another one. a caller saw high in the sky and said it looked like a satellite going west to east, and then saw 15 separate lights following each other in a straight line, evenly spaced. The lights were not blinking. They were steady lights. Drone not too far up in the air, flashing lights on either side. It has 2 lights hovering in one spot. Followed a drone, another call, followed drone from town along South Buffalo and then around the lake by the dump, then into their house. Drone sighting. Seen several drones flying together. Some have flew off and then turned back around. They are flying towards Hershey right now. Made contact with a large. Okay, so this is a call to service from you, Chris, where you state. Let's see. Attempted to make contact with large drone that was flying west. And let's see. I'm going to delete that one. Just kind of. And finally, I want to read this statement that you provided. Again, this is Ord Police Department. This is back when you were chief of police. The legal statement, the statement that was provided to you when you were chief of police there. My daughter and I noticed the drones hovering over Ord along with redacted name. We watched them for about 15 to 30 minutes hovering over the Valley County Courthouse. There maybe was 3 to 4 drones in a row. This was all during daylight. The next night, we started seeing them out at our place 1.5 miles from Ord. I tried to video some of them. However, some of the videos didn't come out clear. The drones had red, green, blue, and white lights. Blue is not a standard color for aircraft. We would see them alone or in multiples in a straight line or circle. They would hover in one spot for a while and then go lower towards the ground. They would also circle around an area and then move online. They would hover until they would see us watching them, and then they would take off fast! Exclamation point. We started noticing them in more numbers, hovering in squares or grids. One night there was one flying west and one flying east at the same time. One flew right by a plane. It got to the point where we could be inside our house and hear them flying around all over our place. One video I was able to rush outside, and in 1 second of video you could hear the engine. We could see all of their lights, the shadow of the shape of the drone, and it flew right over us. Then it was back up in the sky. I mean, really pretty amazing accounts there. Chris, what are calls to service? What have I been reading to our viewers here?
Yeah, so calls to service can be a lot of different things. It can be an actual 911 call, or it could be somebody calling our dispatch center to file a complaint or to let us know something is suspicious. But the calls to service themselves come either directly to the dispatch center and they dispatch us, or say I get a personal phone call from a citizen in the county, and I call my dispatch and say, hey, so-and-so just called me about a suspicious person near Dollar General. And then I tell dispatch, I'm going to be out at Dollar General, reference a suspicious person. Can you make me a call to service for that? And then dispatch makes the call to service. Later in the day, if I need to go do documentation because I made an arrest or I witnessed something that was odd, I would do my report. So a call to service is essentially anything that we as law enforcement officers are able to track, as well as if it goes to a court case or a trial, we would use those calls to service and reports to use them in trial.
Got it. Okay, Sean, back to you. I feel like a news anchor here.
Oh, no, this is great. Yeah, and Matt, because what that conveys to the public is that there was significant concern in the community. It was documented in the computer-aided dispatch system for the police department, and that is one way to catalog all of the witnesses that are saying that they saw what they said that they saw. And this is important to corroborate the information to determine whether or not this is something we need to be concerned with or something that is clearly by the number of reports and the fact that the reports were saying that these drones were hovering over private property, hovering in the vicinity of an airport, and then now, years later, we're being told that these were approved by the FAA. So hopefully what we're going to get out of to really parse out what is reasonable in terms is, what our preparedness level is, and as it compares to the information that we do have. So, Chris, based on all of this information and given the time that has gone by, let me ask you, to date, has there been any accountability as to who was responsible for the in your community?
Nope. We never received any answers from any agency, the local, the state patrol. Obviously, if it wasn't theirs, they never gave us answers. The FBI never gave us answers. It's just kind of been a whatever situation. It seems like nobody wants to tell us, or they don't know.
And what has that done with, in terms of the confidence in public safety efforts? And I know we're talking about, have you as a local county officer or your state partners, have they experienced any flack from the public because of the lack of accountability for these drones?
Not that I'm aware of that they've ever received any flack, but I still to this day have people in my community coming up to me and saying, "So what's going on with this? Why are we still being told that it's FAA approved?" They laugh at that. They're just fed up with why nothing is being told to us truthfully. They never give us flack, but they definitely don't like and appreciate being lied to by the federal government.
Matt, did you have a question?
No, I wanted to jump in. So we are getting, let's see here. So Sean, we're occasionally getting some audio hits on you. So we're having a little bit of dropout, but we'll keep on going. But yeah, the thing I would note is, like I said earlier in the program, the government wants you to think that this is all new, that they've never run into this before. It's a mystery. They want to get to the bottom of it, just like everyone else. And when you listen to Chris Grooms talk about this incident from 2019-2020 and the federal response, or sort of the lack of federal response, how the government reacted in 2019-2020 is literally identical to what you saw just this past November, December, January.
So Chris, I want to ask, after your response to these incidents and the lack of accountability, has this resulted in any changes to your agency's protocols? What changes for improvement, has your made as a result of this?
When I was with the sheriff's office, we tried to figure out what the situation was and what these things were, or who they belong to. But as far as us being able to figure out a better approach, we never really did that at the sheriff's office level. We did put meetings on at the regional dispatch center where all surrounding agencies could come together and discuss better ways to communicate, better detail in reports on what these things possibly could have looked like, that type of stuff. But as far as at the sheriff's office where I was at, we never got around to coming up with anything better that we could do, just because I would assume the lack of information that we were being given. I think that's the biggest problem, is the lack of information that is passed down to your local and state law enforcement. If we had better information or better intelligence, we could act on that and make the area safer, but we're just not getting that.
So we've spent some time talking about the public safety response, and I know a lot of attention is being placed on the federal government to all of our public safety professionals, as well as the public, that this is a collective effort. Especially with the vacation of several federal positions, in many ways, our federal response, may be compromised. So it is imperative that the public remain informed as to what you can do, our public safety professionals, with gathering information. There's a lot of cell phones out there. We need to make sure that we're collecting the information, that we're willing to go on record with what we saw. for the public with these ongoing incursions.
Are you asking me to bring up what the public can do? You cut out.
Yes.
Well, like you said, they need to be contacting us with anything in the sky that they may find to be odd. We haven't seen that stuff around here that I'm aware of lately. There was a deputy that had been seeing some stuff recently, but as far as I know, the public hadn't been calling in on it. But as far as the public, don't be afraid to call your local law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Even if you think that it's, oh, I don't think it was this, or I don't think it was that. Call law enforcement and let them know, give them details, because something that you may be seeing right now may corroborate to something from 3 years ago. And that's how you can build a case or build evidence to what you need to do based off of just the information that a law enforcement officer can receive and go back and look into what it was 3 years ago. So yeah, I feel like around here, we don't have a lot of problems with the public being scared to call law enforcement. We get some pretty odd calls just from people, fighting over, a ketchup bottle. We get those phone calls. So we have to respond to it. We just do. Yeah. So around here, we don't have a lot of problems with the locals reaching out to law enforcement, because for the most part, they trust us. But I feel like that is the biggest thing that the public can do, is just continue to report it to your law enforcement.
Hey, Sean, I'm going to interrupt here because your audio drops are happening more often, and ask you to disconnect from Zoom and reboot the program, and then I'll put you back in there, because I think we're losing some of your excellent questions there.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem at all. So Chris, are you surprised, judging from your experience in dealing with the federal government back in 2019, 2020, and the kind of lack of a response, are you surprised by the response this go around? All of this started, I think it was like November of last year in the UK, and then it started happening in New Jersey. Was there a response? Did it surprise you at all? Quite frankly,
not really, because it's been that way for two different administrations now. If you think about 2019, 2020, when it was going on around us, President Trump was the president. His administration was in power, and we were getting nothing. And then President Biden came in. Now New Jersey's experiencing that stuff, and among other places, and they're getting the same runaround. I was optimistic at first when President Trump made the comment that I'll get to the bottom of it and let the American people know as soon as I get in office. I took that as cool. Maybe we're going to finally get something. But when we were told what the press secretary said, I just kind of shook my head like, okay, we're back to where we were 4 years ago.
I shook my head as well. Sean, I see you're back.
I am, and I actually have to make an adjustment.
Okay. The thrill of doing live streams.
All right, how's my audio?
Oh yeah, no, it's fine. I haven't heard you drop out, so I think hopefully we're good. Knock on wood.
All right, Chris, I want to thank you for your time and for being once again a part of this panel. We thank you for your service, both with the various facets of law enforcement and your service as a military officer for our nation. You are a proxy for public safety in terms of first response to this incident as a direct witness. I want to turn to Richard Lang, former Mutual UFO Network and Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Programs Investigations Coordinator, otherwise known as OSAP. Rich, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. And so as we hand off the baton, when we have an incident, we have a first responder that responds to the scene, collects as much evidence as they can, gather the information, and then the investigator is responsible for conducting the follow-up. Can you give us a little bit of a background in terms of training for public safety professionals, and specifically the gaps? What is public safety not getting in terms of responding to anomalous drone encounters?
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the things that I think, just as we were talking here today, that there's definitely a disconnect as far as reporting goes. And by that, I mean, if you were to go on Google right now and say, how to report a UFO incident or how to report a UAP incident, it's going to take you to sites like MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, or the National UFO Reporting Center. It doesn't tell you to call the local police. And that's kind of the way it's always been in the past. Having worked in the STAR team at MUFON, we got at least 800 reports coming in every month. But people typically haven't been conditioned to get the police involved. And I think that that's one of the things I'm seeing now is that, with the incursion of all this activity, the so-called drones, if you will, for the police are suddenly being pulled into this, where in the past they really weren't. So now you're dealing with a lot of police officers like Chris and a lot of other guys that are out there, and women that are responding to these things, and that probably for the first time. And, one of the reasons that I wrote my book, which is a guide for first responders, I have a really good friend, Dr. Keith Taylor, professor, and he had conducted a survey and basically sent out emails to 300 of the biggest law enforcement agencies in the country, asking them questions like, what type of training do you have to handle UAP events? Do you have any SOPs for dealing with this kind of thing? And also, do you have any kind of equipment that you supply your personnel with? Unfortunately, the answer came back and it was totally negative. No one responded. None of those agencies responded with any kind of applicable training. And so that was kind of what motivated me more than anything else to write my book. And when I did it, I tried to give them a little bit of a history of how this is all developed back from the Truman administration to the current day, and how the defense contractors have been involved in developing this technology and the secrecy that's been involved in that, just so they can get a little bit of an understanding of it, because a lot of people really don't have a good handle on it. And then I put in there a list of all the terms and acronyms that are used to define this stuff, just to help enhance understanding. And then I put a chapter in there about the reconnaissance activity. And essentially, if you have a craft that crashes, the government has teams, what we call them recon units, and they deploy out of different bases around the country, and they're there to come in and secure this stuff and gather it up. And not to say that they're exclusively dealing with UAP or anomalous phenomena, but also if you have an aircraft with a nuclear missile on it, or some type of a craft that crashes, or a piece of a satellite comes down, these are the guys that go out, and it's their job to go and get it, clean it up, and secure it. And so I put a chapter in my book how they would react with the local police. And that typically might mean if there's a crash somewhere, they're going to put a cover story out, quarantine the area, probably use local police officers to maintain the perimeter. But typically, local police don't get inside the perimeter to see what they're actually doing or recovering. And then the most important chapter in the book, again, the whole context of my book was for officer safety, because when you look at investigative, the investigations, in responses, there's really two things that we're dealing with. One is that, you go and investigate something to collect data and, photographs, videos, and all that kind of stuff for the research. The other side of it is just to make sure that the officers are trained so that they can respond safely to this stuff without any personal injury. And so I had put a list together of things that we kind of wanted them to understand, and we can talk a little bit. There's some very simple equipment that I recommend they have in the police cars that would really help protect them. But basically, you're dealing with somebody that gets a call. You're on patrol, 2:30 in the morning, and some lady calls up and she's all upset that because something's landed or crashed in her pasture and she's afraid it's going to hurt her horses. So you roll up on the scene, and there's some things that you need to understand and know as you get close to that. And part of what I'm saying here, a lot of it is information that I've developed over doing years of research and working with witnesses and looking at reports and some of the things that have happened to individuals that cause them to have health effects. And by that I mean, like, you have a typical scenario, over the years, there's been a number of these cases where there's some people that are out in the remote area somewhere, and for whatever reason, they're confronted with phenomena, whether it's a craft or whatever. And so the next thing you know, the car stopped, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. So, the two people in the front seat jump out of the car, and they're wandering around looking and trying to figure out what's happening. And then the third person is like scared to death and curled up on the floor in the back seat. And then a month later, the two individuals that were out of the car are developing all kinds of adverse health effects, tumors, possible cancer, that kind of thing. And the guy that was scared and hiding in the back seat has no health effects to deal with. So the bottom line is that you can deduce that the car protects you from some of the hazards that might be encountered. It's the metal in the car that will protect you. And so we talk about these the hazards. These crashes, they could be you can have nuclear radiation, electromagnetic fields, high electrostatic energy, and there could be toxic substances or even some biohazards.
Hey,
So,
Richard, so let me just jump in real quick here, because you gave a great summary of what you would do in an investigation, but I want to kind of break this into pieces. So we have the scene response, where we're collecting the data, we're identifying witnesses, we're collecting evidence, and then we follow up, and then we identify certain hazards that may have been present at the scene. I want to make a distinction between what your duties were as the OSEP MUFON coordinator and what we're seeing on the East Coast and what Chris is describing out in Nebraska. And then we have other reports on the West Coast and around the world. It's important to make a distinction between the incidents that reportedly involve these types of health incidents and these types of distinguishing features that we would characterize as anomalous, and incidents that are being heavily covered in the news and that the FAA and federal government are saying, hey, these are hobbyists, these are approved FAA flights, and these are just normal drones or advanced drones. When you conduct your investigations, what important pieces of information are you collecting to say, hey, this is not a conventional piece of equipment or a conventional description of anything? What exactly are you pinning down to separate the wheat from the chaff?
well, Sean, I think that the thing that we have to distinguish here is there's a difference between me deploying an investigator to go out and work on a case where someone's reported an incident. And the whole context of my book was really not about investigating UFO cases. It was about officer safety and the kind of things that need to be done to protect them personally, if you will. I think that, as we're looking at all these cases that are coming in, and I've looked at hundreds of them over the years, the whole concept of the drone, I mean, a lot of us that have been around a while, we kind of jokingly say that the concept of drones is like the new word for swamp gas. And the reason that we think that is because if you say the word drone, most people find it pretty disarming. Someone will say, oh yeah, we bought our kids a drone for Christmas last year. We were just playing with it out in the backyard last summer. And so the concept of a drone is very disarming. And whoever came up with that, it was really a brilliant deception, if you will, as far as what's going on with this phenomena. And again, I think John and Gerry probably could define this a lot better than me, but what they're seeing out there is that there are multiple types of these things, and some of them are occurring simultaneously. And so it's very difficult to sort of sort it all out, if you will. I had recently, one of my guys that worked with me during the ASAP program was he lives in New Jersey, and him and his friend hiked into an area where they were known to be seeing these drones. And you know, he gave me a pretty comprehensive description of what it looked like. And ultimately there were 3 of them that came pretty close to them. And the kind of things that, you know, they're talking about something that's hovering at treetop level. And these things, the 3 of them, they were synchronized. So if one of them would turn, they would all turn the same way, exactly the same time. And one of them got within about 70 yards of him. And again, these are at tree level, so they're low. And he had one of his, you know, he had a tri-field meter with him set in the magnetic range, and it just pegged the meter. It started, you know, it went off really hard. And he also noticed that he was feeling a tingling sensation on his skin, on his face. And he said that he thought that, you know, like the next day he kind of had a sunburn from it, which would be typical of the magnetic radiation that it would cause that kind of damage. And he also said that it had a kind of a humming sound, and it had no propellers or wings or anything like that on it. He described it as like an elongated rectangle, shaped like a shoebox, if you will, and it was about the size of a minivan, and it got that close to him. So we kind of thought that was interesting. And then I had John and Gerry look at Joe DiEduardo's testimony in the video that we did with him. And, you know, I think they can tell you that they were seeing objects that were pretty much, you know, they've identified the same kind of phenomena up in New York. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. So as we, again, it answers the question, but I want to reemphasize one of the problems that we have in addressing this issue is that we have people on the far end of the spectrum that, you know, have put a label that this is, you know, something, you know, otherworldly. And then we have the opposite perspective with it, which is this is just conventional, prosaic, you know, tech. So the importance of you know, a response preparedness plan for public safety professionals is to be able to accurately identify all of the steps that need to be taken in an investigation so that we can you know, establish, you know, the credibility and veracity of witnesses, to secure digital evidence and data, and to make sure that anything that may have been deposited by the drone is identified for examination. You know, without those steps, then, you know, we're kind of running in circles as to what this is or what it isn't. And then, you know, we're dealing with issues like in Chris's community, where people are frustrated, and not just in that community, but throughout our nation, as to the lack of knowledge as to what this is. So I want to ask you, what resources do you recommend for today's response, given that the government position is that these are all approved FAA flights or hobbyists, and there's, you know, there's no evidence to indicate that it's a public safety hazard?
Cool. Yeah. Let me go that. I see where you're going. Okay. You know, some of the research that's been done, and Jim Segala has recently done some interviews talking about the research that they did on the Skinwalker Ranch when they were dealing with anomalous phenomena. So I would say that there's probably about 5 or 6 things that occur during an anomalous event that would help you identify whether it's a star or a space station, or whether it's really something that's happening. First of all, if you have an anomalous event, some type of a UAP, it gets in close proximity, there's typically a gamma radiation spike. So when you have you know, like on our field teams, we're recommending them, you know, to use these little radiation detectors, which are pretty accurate and reliable. And so if you're out in the field and something happens where something, you know, gets close, if you start seeing gamma spikes, it's not enough to like harm you. It's like turned on and turned off real quick, but it's definitely definable with the meter. Also, same thing. You'll get spikes with electromagnetic energy, usually in the magnetic range. Another thing that you'll notice is that if you have a GPS, I have a GPS, and when you turn it on, it'll maybe identify 12 satellites. Well, if you're watching that thing and all of a sudden it goes down to one satellite or two satellites, there's usually something anomalous involved in that. And obviously interruptions in cell phones. And, so what I'm trying to say is, like when we have these guys that are going out and doing night watches or responding to radar alarms or something like that, if you have the radiation detector, if you have the magnetic, the tri-field type meters, those will give you some, and the ones that we recommend have alarms in them. So you're basically, when the alarms start going off, something's going on. And that's a good way to sort of identify them. Because a lot of times, in my experience in years past, people will report something that flew over their house and landed in the woods behind the house. And sometimes things happen that look like that. I had an investigator went out one night, guy was a physician, and he basically made a report that said this thing came over his house and then it went down in the field way beyond, in the woods behind his house. So, the investigator goes out, sits down on the back porch where the guy was, and he's got his computer and it's got basically a star map in there. And what you do is you put the coordinates of where you are and the date and time, and it'll give you a picture of what that night sky looked like that night. And they're quite useful. So he's with this guy, and the guy says, "Yeah, it was 9:30." So he takes his mouse and rolls the time in at 9:30. And there's this really bright light right up in the sky. And he's moving at 10:30, and you can see the light just appears to come over and go down in the horizon. And the guy's like, yeah, that's exactly what I saw. And the investigator goes, "That was Jupiter." So that happens. And there are things out there in the night sky that look anomalous and they're not. But
Richard, I'm glad that you addressed the issue of misidentification, because it's a real issue. It's something that happens. People are not lying when they say that they saw something and it was a mistake. Okay, you went through quite a bit of equipment that will help our investigators and first responders conduct the investigation. One of the challenges with getting that type of equipment is procurement. So it's a challenge to have agencies buy equipment for which they don't have a demonstrated purpose that is going to be used to justify the cost. What do you say to our public safety agencies, or even our the public who want to invest in these items? What do you recommend as far as immediate purchases to address these?
Yeah, I think in going back to the original concept is the training is the most critical part, because you can have the greatest equipment in the world if you don't know how to use it, or then it's pretty useless. But I would say as a very minimum, and again, I just produced a video for our field team, and it's just basically a thing that helps them to put together a kit, what you need to have in the field. One of the things that I start out with is these little radiation detectors. This particular one, it's the best-selling one on Amazon right now. I read a report that was done by a very technical company, and they gave it like a 4.8. It's accurate, it's reliable. You can charge it up, it'll stay for 10 hours. It's got alarms in it, and they cost maybe 60, 80 bucks. They're not that expensive anymore. The other thing is there's different types of them, but these are called tri-field meters. They basically pick up electric energy, magnetic energy, and RF, like from cell phone towers and things like that. And I'd recommend that you set it on the magnetic setting. And I think anything over 5 mg is where you got to start worrying where it could cause a health problem. And so those are probably the two. Then there's also another thing that I was showing you guys earlier tonight. This is like a little credit card. It's a little plastic card. And this was developed for Homeland Security. And there's a whole bunch of different government agencies that use these now. They cost 20 bucks. And when they come, they're in a little plastic bag. And when you open it up, it'll last for almost 3 years. Basically, you can carry this in your wallet or hang it on your credentials. And if you've ever been exposed to anything radioactive, you can see these little bar charts here. There's a chart, and it tells you they'll change color and indicate the level of exposure that you've had to radiation. So everybody on our team, we're trying to get them all to carry these around with them, at least when they're deployed, for sure. So that's kind of it. And just a couple other quick things is anyone that's in the field, particularly an officer, one of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want to walk under a craft that's hovering, because most of what we call electrogravitic propulsion, it affects human skin tissue the same way it would if you stuck your arm in a microwave oven. It'll cause skin tissue damage. And so we always tell them that, if you're on patrol or if you're an investigator and you get in close proximity to an event that's occurring, you want to make sure, if you can, stay in the car, because the car really will protect you. And also the tinted windshield will protect your eyes a little bit too. If you get close to something that's on the ground and it's still powered up, there can be different types of radiation coming off it. There can be ultraviolet radiation that will give you skin, it'll burn you like sunburn. But there's also, in some cases, there's X radiation and gamma radiation that's strong enough to cause radiation sickness. And what I tell, law enforcement people is, when you get in close proximity to this phenomena, you may see that dash cams will quit working, body cams will quit working, radio equipment will fail, and that's very typical. And that's the same thing that happens with investigators. Our guy out there in New Jersey was trying to, he had an iPhone 13, and when he tried to take a picture of it, the focus would just keep going in and out. It wouldn't lock in. And there's kind of like he described the light as kind of slightly stroboscopic. So it confuses the autofocus systems in the cameras. It makes it more difficult to photograph. And we recommend using more like a DLSR and then manually focusing it.
All right, Richard, thank you for providing that breakdown of the safety considerations. And obviously, we want to remind our public safety professionals as well as the public that procedures for managing hazardous materials are provided in the United States Department of Transportation Emergency Response Guidebook. This provides the relative distance when should be to avoid exposure. So basically, if you can smell it or you can feel it, you're in it. And what you've described is, the effects of radiation that may not be immediately apparent. I asked Chris, hey, did you feel any heat or any type of unusual effects from the environment? He said no. But as we know with radiation, and we still don't know, when cancer manifests, when did it start? We haven't been able to pinpoint that. So these items that you've mentioned are important for public safety agencies to consider. Doing some research and purchasing, and hopefully we'll, in the event that these drone incursions continue, they are apparently continuing, as we heard from Ross Coulthart earlier. It is important to have a plan. So, Richard, thank you for being on our panel today and part of this discussion. At this time, I would like to turn to Gerry and John Tedesco, electrical engineers who have taken it upon themselves to apply some very innovative techniques with technologies to detect these drones. And what they've done is been able to use hyperspectral photography to visualize things that they can see only in certain spectrums, but not with the naked eye. So, Gerry and John, thank you for joining us again once today. And if you could please tell us what technology or behavior have you been able to detect using your methods?
Sure. Thank you, Sean. Also, Matt, thank you very much for having us back. The comments, the observations that both Chris and Rich have presented is pretty much in line with what we've been observing on the east coast of the U.S. On the off the Long Island coast. We're seeing objects out there that they're not micro drones, they're not mini drones. They seem to be much larger. They're presenting with certain lighting systems that look like navigation lights. We're not exactly sure if they're in the proper sequence, or if their flash rates are the same, because they seem to change. You'll see these lights. They'll go from red and green to white, and there's at times there seems to be no real pattern to it. The flash rates will change. The objects will they seem to take on a different type of appearance at times. So, we kind of want to keep a group of items together, a group of observations together, Because they're I think they're all one and the same. You're talking UAP, whether they're drones or drone-like objects, they have an anomalous a characteristic about them that they're presenting in certain ways that don't are not typical. They're not typical of what we see with drones. We've heard a number of reports out in the field about these objects suddenly going dark, as Chris mentioned, or suddenly taking off at a very rapid rate of speed. And this is not typical of most drone type objects that you're seeing out there. Whether or not there's a combination of them, possibly a military component to it that is actually flying the drones out there, which are a high tech version of it, which is not typical of commercial drones that we're seeing. So I think that's what people are getting right. They're getting right that they are seeing stuff out there that is not typical. And the reason for so many reports that we're hearing about. There is a fair share of typical commercial traffic, and we've made mistakes ourselves as far as identifying it. But you need certain types of equipment to dive into those characteristics and understand what they are. There's certain camera systems. We use hyperspectral cameras. There's also radiation or background monitoring equipment, environmental monitoring equipment that I think is required, especially for first responders that are up against something that they really don't know what they're up against, especially what Rich has mentioned. Those are concerns. Those are real concerns. And as far as having the proper equipment, it's of course it's safe, better safe than sorry. But there's quite a few pieces of equipment that the law enforcement already has and that can be utilized right away. This is their speed guns, their radar guns, there's LiDAR guns that can give you range and velocity of an object. These are the kind of things that we really need to know from folks that are on the front lines, like Chris. It's we don't always get an ideal situation. It's not always ideal when we're out there, we're making these observations. And, for somebody to see something that's literally 60 feet away, that's the kind of data points we need. That's the kind of data that we need to look at and understand and analyze to come up with a characterization of what these things are and a methodology for detecting them. And this is what we've tried to do over the last few years that we've been out at Robert Moses State Park. Now, we do have a number of equipment that we use on a regular basis. We have made suggestions, and some of those suggestions are very much what Rich had already pointed out. But again, it's using the speed guns, the radar guns that the law enforcement has on them most of the time, LiDAR systems, LiDAR guns, the flashlights. There are times, and if they are going dark, I would cautiously advise people to use those lights to light them up, to find out what is up there. And of course, that's I'm speaking from a researcher's point of view with right now. And of course, take those precautions, in stride, and if you feel uncomfortable, if folks feel uncomfortable about doing that, then I certainly wouldn't recommend it. But for us personally, we're trying to understand what they are.
So let me just jump in here because you said some things that are very important in terms of identifying some things that are concerned. Again, we keep getting this message that there's no evidence that this is a public safety hazard. Can you share with us any specific markers that indicate advanced capabilities that could be a public safety hazard?
So we have a situation back in August of 22, a physical side of it, where we had observed an object that was just off the coast. It was on the water shore, and we were subjected to some kind of for lack of a better word, a flaccid paralysis. It was very short-lived. was from an observation we were making down there of an invisible a triangle of invisible set of lights that was in the form of an isosceles triangle. And these lights would they would synchronize rotation, as Richard pointed out, with somebody that he had spoken to that made an observation with this. And we had observed this in night vision equipment, so we weren't able to see it, physically or visibly with the naked eye. And under that night vision equipment, we had something that had approached us, right on the shore, and we had a physical reaction from it. It's not something we can wrap our heads around. I really don't know how to advise anybody as far as what we even believe it might have been. It's it was a surprise, tough to wrap your head around, but it did have an effect on us. And if that is the case, you certainly want to avoid that as much as you can. And
did you receive any sort of medical evaluation or support following this exposure?
No, we did not. We did not. We had followed it up with the UAP medical group, and we had spoken to their medical team. We had met with a team of neuroscientists, and including I think a neurologist, and we had spoken about it. We also had spoken with an emergency room physician about it later on, but at this point in time, it was too far removed from the event that you probably wouldn't show anything. And there's such a stigma around it that it wasn't something that we wanted to openly, advertise out there with our research. We just didn't know what to make of it. We just had no idea what to make of it at that time.
Well, and so that's part of the problem. And again, hats off to you both for coming forward and sharing this. It's a challenge when you're engaging in research, and you're like the fireman, right? The firefighter who's going into the fire, and you're exposed to the hazard. So you're running toward the hazard. You're not running away from it, and therefore you're subject to these exposures. But at the same time, because these types of exposures are not readily understood, you have some reservations about making a formal report. So I just want to confirm, did you make a formal report or did you not?
We did not.
Okay.
We didn't.
Yeah. So again, to our public, we want to make sure that we encourage you to, if something like this does happen, to make a formal report. Gerry and John, you're in the thick of it, and we appreciate the technical expertise that you're lending to this. As far as the technical limitations that relate to electronic jamming and identification, have you come across anything that would indicate some sort of electronic jamming or communication by this technology toward your devices?
Yes. Yeah. So this was we did go out in December of between Christmas and New Year's when this New Jersey drone flap was occurring, and it wasn't just occurring in New Jersey. The reality was it was occurring all throughout the Northeast. These numbers, the amount of reports were growing throughout the Northeast. It wasn't just New Jersey. It was Connecticut. It was Long Island, New York, Staten Island. Right. And this is a statistic that can also be looked up in Enigma Labs. They actually have a piece of software that they're documenting these cases. But in December and early January, when we went out there, it was more the December incident. We had seen objects out there. Some of them were drone-like. Some of them looked like orbs, what we were seeing before. But when we were tracking these objects, but both of them out there, we did get these odd radar reflections that appeared to be. It looks similar to what you would see with radar jamming. You'd get these radial reflections along on the display of the radar. Yeah, interference patterns. Yeah, long delay echoes. Some unusual, very unusual interference patterns. This is something that we're not exactly sure what is occurring around these objects that's producing this effect. I know some people see the chromatic changes of light, that they seem to have a kaleidoscope appearance to them when they see them, when they're visible. Other times they'll see what looks like a rotating polyhedron. And most of the time it can't be visualized in the visible light. It has to be, you have to use some kind of NVG, some kind of night vision goggles, a night vision camera, or a night vision system that you can actually make these things out. They do seem to be accompanying the drones, and this is what we had observed back in November of 2022. It looked like drone swarm out there, and it only lasted for 3 weeks. That was it. After that 3 week period, the objects that looked like drones, they just suddenly disappeared. They weren't there. We were just looking at these other objects that were characteristic of what we've been seeing over the last 3 years.
And that's something I wanted to clarify is we're putting everything in one basket, but there was what we were seeing with two types of objects. There was these drone-like objects that would flash, you would see more than one single light. And then there was these orb-like objects or orbs that would just a single light. And then these orb-like objects would have more bizarre characteristics and behaviors. And the drone-like objects we're talking about, these things, we would also look at behavior. I want to go back on the equipment. Is to track these objects, we were using active radar. We're using two types of radar, X and Y axis radar. They're on two different geometries, so we can get a better profile of these. We're also using millimeter wave radar, portable radars to detect them. Anything in the skies that you want to use radar. Besides the hyperspectral cameras to see them with, whether they were visible or they were in the infrared range or in the ultraviolet, they were using hyperspectral cameras to detect them and track them. And that's how we arrived at the objects we're talking about, the two types of objects.
Okay, so Richard earlier went through a mini inventory of equipment and supplies that he would use for his investigations, and you two are using innovative technologies to detect these objects where people with plain vision can't detect them. And you are sharing with us additional effects, what you described as neuromuscular effects, as well as electronic jamming. What we haven't talked about are drone surveillance. To your knowledge, have you observed any drone activity that seems to be ours, trying to make an identification of what this is, or have you sent up a drone yourself?
Yeah, so that's the interesting part. I mean, we haven't sent up our own drone. We've had plenty of suggestions to do that, which we haven't done yet. But we are detecting with the spectrum analyzers a certain carrier frequency, which is it's not really indicative of drone remote access or drone remote controls. The frequencies typically, with smaller drones, micro drones, mini drones, you're talking anything like 900 megahertz on up. So these frequencies can be in bundles of 3 to 4 gigahertz. They can be 1 to 2 gigahertz. They can also be as high up as 130 gigahertz up the chain. So it's the frequencies can be extremely high, but nothing that we've observed so far, especially with the high counts that we're seeing out there at that time, we couldn't correlate any specific spectrums of frequencies that could have been used for control. They're very difficult to see, and these particular frequencies they're high in amplitude, but they're almost like transients. They're almost like pilot signals, and there doesn't seem to be any intelligence around it that is doing any real control, unless they're putting a pilot signal out there when they're in close proximity to each other, or an aircraft. I don't know.
And I want to clarify what John's talking about. He's talking about transmitting signals. You'll get these sidebands of frequencies that are it's carrying data. They're intelligent. It's called intelligence. But you get these sideband frequencies. We're getting these narrow pulses when these drone-like objects are out, and they usually pop in at about 1.7 gigahertz and 1.8 gigahertz. They're usually they're dual signals that pop up when these things are out.
They're always accompanied, one accompanies the other.
Yeah.
The largest signals are 1.79 or 1.75 gigahertz, and then you have a 1.81, which is at a much lower amplitude, but they seem to occur together. That's the only thing that we're picking up out in the field when we were seeing high traffic areas.
Yeah, and they're not typical to normal RF transmitting
Right.
radio
So-
frequencies of typical drones.
And there seems to be patterns with magnetometers as well. It's not just the RF frequencies that we're seeing. We're seeing a specific pattern with the magnetometers as well as the ultrasonic detection systems that we have as well. So there seems to be some correlation, which we're still trying to figure out. We're still working on at this point. But getting back as far as the type of equipment that we're trying to basically rally for is for the police departments to have, or emergency management to have some kind of systems that may eliminate some of those wild guesses as far as what it is that they're encountering and that sort of thing. We highly recommend night vision cameras, which are near infrared or shortwave infrared. The type of stuff that the law enforcement already has, speed guns are very important. The radars themselves, and millimeter wave radar between 24 gigahertz and 36 are the two different types. I think they use Stalker, and they have a range of about 1.5 miles to 2 miles, something the size of an SUV, and something the size of an airliner or something the size of a tractor trailer. You can go out almost 3 miles for detection capability. Now, it doesn't matter whether these objects are moving very quickly. The only thing that we're concerned about, and the thing that we're interested in, is whether or not they're producing a Doppler effect, a reflection from the radar. That there's something tangible there's something that has mass. And whether you hear a chirp or you hear a Doppler changing sounds, a frequency changing, those are the kind of things that are important to us. Because it's more than just a plasma, or it's more than just swamp gas.
And I want to back up with something here. Many of the police forces, like in Orange County, I know they were doing it. I think they're doing it in Monmouth County, New Jersey. The sheriff's departments, they did have a mobile command unit, drone unit that they were deploying. I know they were looking at ADS-B data to track planes, manned aircraft. They were launching their own drones, 6-foot industrial drones, with both FLIR and a standard camera system on it. And they were getting some unusual things. They actually have a video of an object that was oval shaped. It was a greenish color, greenish hue to it. It had a yellow red beacon in the front. It had one on the bottom, which weren't always on. It would occasionally flash in the direction of travel of the object. They also talked about these objects having no thermal signature, odd flight behaviors such as speeding towards the drone they launched and stopping, making a 180 degrees turn around it, back shooting back off in the distance, then shooting back towards the drone again and making a U-turn around it. So it just didn't fit normal
and no sound.
And no sound, yeah. So
exactly.
So they were detecting.
What Chris
They were doing their due diligence detecting, these, going out and investigating and trying to.
So they're doing a pretty good job with what they have as far as.
Yeah, and they've reported this. But it seems to have gone, kind of ignored, I guess.
So Gerry and John, if you can give us a kind of a scenario, an actual situation, you just gave us a good description, but at some point we're going to show some video of an experience that you had. Can you tell us about a significant experience that we might be able to see on video or photo that would provide us some visual context?
Sure.
Do we want to play the video that you guys sent?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that, and then and then you can comment over it. Here we go.
And the recent
wrong one.
Okay, so this was back in November 2022. I think it was November 12th. What we were seeing is you're seeing these objects that we were off on the Fire Island National Seashore. It's a barrier island off of Long Island. And you're seeing these clusters of objects. Some of them were very low to the water. Here's something that was drone-like, and what it's doing is it's shining some kind of there's another light or object flashing off to the side of it, and it looks like it's trying to observe this object by using these search beams. And you see it lighting up a cloud down here.
Yeah, whether it anti-collision lights or something else, but they're extremely bright. It's I know,
But they were actually shining search beams
right,
laterally
right.
out.
And these drones, drones typically are 500 lumens as far as their lighting system.
And here's another object. This is a drone-like object again. It's pulsing. There's another object that's very low over the water. There's another one that's flashing. It's sitting on the water.
Yeah, so you'll see that the object just below it is an orb, and the object above that we believe to be this.
That's these drone-like objects that appear to be, they're flashing there.
And the same can be said with these two objects here. You have one.
Gerry and John, was there any
small.
indication that any of these drones were operated by any of our government or any known entity or?
No, that was the issue with the spectrum analyzers. We couldn't get, we expected to see some kind of a remote transmission around it, that would give its commands and that sort of thing, some intelligence of, directionality and so forth, some control signals, but we saw nothing. We saw nothing other than what looked like pilot signals.
The other thing I wanted to talk about is we did do a deep dive on that. We had an investigator with us, Donalene Arno. She once worked as a private investigator. She actually checked in with the DHS. She checked in with the Law Enforcement Marine Bureau. She checked in with Coast Guard. Yep. She checked in with many of the other agencies. Nobody would take responsibility for these objects.
I see. And I noticed that there was a light flashing what seemed to be from whoever's taking this footage. What was the objective of shining the light?
All right. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to hit back. We've seen in the past where if we hit it with a torch, a visible torch, or an infrared torch, move that light, that emitter, in front of the objects or against the objects to see if they're reflecting light back.
Yeah, we also want to see if there's structure. So
we want to see if there's structure. We also want to determine the range, because we know what the range of the torch is. We know what the range of the IR emitter is. And there was one is 1,300 meters, the other one is a little bit more. So we know how far they can penetrate output before you get a reflection. So we were looking for that, and of course we got it. We were reflecting light back from these objects. The objects that didn't give us any visible signature, when we hit it with a visible torch, we could see a reflection coming back from that object. So if the object went dark, we were able to illuminate it to some extent and see it.
And if you like I said, if you take enough time to look at this video, this is typical. We were seeing there looks like two types of objects out there.
Two distinct patterns.
Two distinct objects. There's the drone-like objects where you see the flash patterns, and you see this looks like searchlights. They look like the surveilling or looking at these orbs. These objects that appear to be orbs or a single source of light. And they're spherical.
Right, and we'd be tracking these orbs with night vision cameras, night vision goggles, so we could see them. And we could see with the motion of the orbs, if they would move in a certain direction, it seemed like these drone-like objects would basically follow the same course, almost in a pursuit or surveillance operation.
And what did the drones look like when you were not using the night vision camera or the IR camera?
So the thing is, we couldn't identify anything other than the bright light.
It was just bright light
that were on the object itself.
Never saw structure. We never heard them. No sounds.
No sounds. We could never see the structure. Even with the FLIR camera, the long wave thermal camera, we would expect to see a thermal signature. Well, we didn't get that. Yeah. So.
And it's kind of how long did this observation last?
We're seeing both types of objects. It was about 2 weeks in November of 2022, and it was another. I think it was a week in October.
The end of October.
And at the end of October. And in the drone-like objects, we didn't see it again, but we continued to see these orbs.
Yeah, for the video that we just saw, how long were those drones out? And that was all over the water, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. How long were those drones hovering over the water?
They were out there from 7 to probably 11 o'clock, 11:30.
11:30. Yeah.
And were you
But
out there the entire time to have visual that they did not
Yeah, we would be
go
out.
to another place and redeploy?
Yeah, we would be out there all night, and eventually they kind of disappeared.
Okay.
And
And it may because we don't, and it may be because they shut their, their lighting down, or they changed their spectral signatures, but they weren't there.
right, and that there's like I said, these times are pretty well defined. I mean, it's 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night till almost 12 o'clock at night. It's 12.
And this is just for the drone-like objects.
Just for the drone.
The orbs we could see, that could go all night long. We'd see them case, they'd be sporadic, occasionally pop in and out, appear and disappear.
All right, so 5 hours or more over the water, no apparent signs of redeployment. And to your knowledge, have you ever seen anything like that before that we can account for in our inventory?
No, nothing like that. It's the sheer number of them out there. I mean, that night we were seeing anywhere between 15 to 30.
And they could loiter for long periods of time, for hours.
Yeah.
And very bright lights, so they'd be running. I mean, you would running down a battery source. Right, the lights are extremely bright.
Yeah. That's that's the other thing.
It's on typical drones.
It's certainly not commercial drones. So if anything, these are large drones, and obviously they have the capacity to run those bright lights, which has got to be better than 500 lumens.
Yeah,
it has to be.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Yeah.
Gerry and John, this is fantastic work. It would be great to see similar footage captured by other investigators in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. So we appreciate the work that you're doing. What's next in your investigations? What do you have planned next?
So we're trying to work with, of course, law enforcement and other agencies as well, as far as putting together some kind of a means of testing this stuff, of measuring it. It's or detecting it. Coming up with some kind of a methodology, and there's a couple of things that we'd like to suggest right away, and that's with the possibility of UVC burns. Which is we've actually had detections out there with a UVC detector. Now our detector is very sensitive. It can see a fire the size of a campfire from almost 25,000 feet. So it's very, very sensitive in that regard. UVC detection is primary for plasmas, coronal discharges, arcs, something that's giving off. I know there's been some observations in the past where they were reported as having a buzzing sound. And a bluish glow around them, which could be very much indicative of UVC
and
UVC pattern.
And I want to mention something of that we actually had our own observation. We have a video of an object, had a bluish hue to it. It was flickering. It was rotating. It was traveling along the shoreline, and we actually had the UVC detector out there, and it actually triggered the UVC detector 3 times. Which indicated this was either giving off some kind of corona discharge or high voltage electrical discharge, or it was some kind of plasma sheath around the object. But it was an orb, a spherical, a bluish spherical object.
Right.
And so that's not a hazard apparently. We have a ton of questions, and I just want to point something out. You guys have done some amazing work. You were very articulate in explaining your process. For anyone who woke up halfway through or at the end of physics class, it probably went way over the head. But this is the importance of having our best and brightest conduct these investigations. So I want to turn back to Matt. We have quite a few questions, and we apologize in advance if we don't answer every question in full. But Matt, please give us the questions that you have.
All right. Yeah, great. Yeah. So yeah, folks, thanks for all the questions. Quite a few of them here. Some are just comments. Jackson, Matt Ford, you're a patriot. Everyone is a guest on the show are patriots. Much respect. Thank you very much for that. Sylvie Gauthier. Drones are showing up all over the world. How come this is not a worldwide concern? Who wants to take that?
That's what we'd like to know.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a really good question.
I think it probably is a worldwide concern.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
let's
think the
see.
consensus is that it should be a worldwide concern. That's why we're holding this panel discussion to advocate for clarity on what reports are being made, to the frequency and type of activity that is being reported, and the importance of having a preparedness, a response preparedness plan for these ongoing incursions.
Absolutely. We have a question here for all. When will when will you podcasters begin to push people like Putoff and other people who clearly have some hard answers for evidence? It's good, but I don't quite understand it. But yes, hey, if I can get Hal Putoff on the show, absolutely. Friend of the show, David Smethurst. Blah, blah, blah. Does the panel think we are seeing human-made drones using some reverse-engineered exotic tech from adversaries or from U.S. or both?
Richard, I'm going to ask that you respond to that. Given
Well, I think that it's a combination of all the above. There's clearly some, man-made vehicles, if you will, and I think that what you guys are seeing in your instruments is there's like more than one phenomena occurring at the same time, and so yeah, I think it's probably a combination of the above. And just the other point with when somebody said about the worldwide phenomena, one of the things I thought was kind of ludicrous is the fact that they're saying the FAA approved it, but from a logistical standpoint, they don't have much to do with the other parts of the world.
That's for sure. Richard Chaffee, any electronic interference at all?
Are you asking me?
I'd say they're probably for Gerry and John.
Yeah, yes, so we've had instances of electromagnetic interference on hyperspectral equipment. In one case, it caused one of our pieces of equipment to actually fail.
Do you think it was intentional or just a byproduct? Like, did it feel like it was targeted?
We're not really sure in that case. It could have been a byproduct, but we're not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's the field itself. It's when we had one of the cameras down by the water. It had a plastic enclosure. Most of the cameras that we use, we try to go with a metal enclosure. We try to wrap it in some kind of a Faraday cage, if you will, some kind of a EMP shield, because we have had camera batteries that were failing when they should have, if they should have lasted 4 hours and we got maybe an hour out of it or less. And then all of a sudden, as if you leave the battery on a shelf somewhere for a while, it would basically seem to almost like repolarize and operate normally, which is unusual,
And I could also add that, I'm sorry, I could add that there's been cases where we've had cars that are disabled where it literally just shuts the whole car off.
Right. So it's so these are the kind of things, and especially with our radar systems, we've had some very unusual interference patterns, which look like radial streaks from the center where the RV would be, the mobile lab, and outward in the distance you'd see these linear patterns of lines that were generated by multiple reflections.
All right, let's see here. Get another one. Jordan Lee, a fantastic show, guys. Thank you so much. Paris Diamonds. Have any men in black come to town at that occurrence? Not sure which occurrence, but any men in black?
In our case, we were out there, a couple of times we were out there. There was we have a permit to be out there, so they actually bar the public from being out there past 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. They actually told to leave. They made to leave by the park police. We actually had some vehicles out there about I think it was midnight one night.
Yeah.
And they were out there. They actually formed an arc around our vehicle. They had tinted windows. They had their high beams on so they could see us, but we couldn't see them. There were people moving out of the vehicles, looking over. But we had turned the lights on our cameras to let them know that we were filming. So which maybe it kept us safe. They were out there for maybe an hour, then they left, and that happened, I think, twice.
Unusual activity.
You know, so I don't know who or
Did they have government license plates on the cars, G plates?
we could see there were black Suburbans, as black.
Yeah, black Suburban. You couldn't see the plates either.
Yeah.
You couldn't.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why you couldn't see the plates.
But they were curious about what we were doing out there.
And I take it you guys didn't go up and offer him a Diet Coke or anything like that.
No, we show us our cell phones and our cameras on our vehicle, make sure they saw the lighting on it, that everything was being filmed.
Gotcha. Okay, let's see here. Okay, hold on one second. All right. Let's see. Tim, any spectrum data on the lighting itself? Any? Yeah, I mean that's actually a really good question. Anything on the spectrum wise that would tell you like how pure the light is? Was it always the same frequency, et cetera?
Yes. Yeah. So the interesting thing is that we're actually we're in a process of submitting another paper with using spectrographs or
Radio spectroscopy.
doing radio spectroscopy on these the lights themselves, and of course with the we're using a certain kind of spectrometer that can go from the UVC down to 194 nanometers on up to almost 1200 nanometers up in the IR range. So it covers a large swath of frequencies from visible light to UV to IR, and it takes the IR into the shortwave infrared. So what we're trying to do is put together a system of determining signatures of planes, of drones.
Yeah.
Because those lighting, metal halide lighting systems or LED lighting systems, they all have unique spectral signatures, spectral footprints. We should be able to tell right away whether it's a typical halogen light that's being used on a plane, or if it's something else,
Or if it's a plasma,
plasma.
which has specific frequencies,
Yeah,
which
very-
we can detect.
And very
And we're in a
specific.
process, like I said, the radio spectroscopy came later because it was based on funding, which wasn't always available to us. We had actually had a funder that helped us with that, and that was the last piece of equipment we bought. But right now we're actually running the tests to put together a pattern of signatures, so we can identify manned aircraft from drones to possibly if something else, maybe it's a plasma powered electrical power, so the electrical.
Every lighting system that is out there has its own unique signature.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to determine, what those signatures are.
Got it. Okay, Sarah, why are most reporters not pushing when the answer for what the drones are is clearly BS? Are they being intimidated, or are they just rolling over? Chris, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously it's very, very infuriating. It's frustrating that, a lot of these journalists aren't taking it very serious, or they're not pursuing it in any way. But there are a few out there that are doing a good job, and obviously, hopefully they can help us get to the bottom of it. Obviously you, Matt, Ross, and just people like that need to continue to pursue it. But I think the mainstream media is just kind of it's a dead horse. You just don't know what to think anymore when they put out their information. You don't know if it's going to be fake or wrong, or if there's a bias agenda to it. You just don't know. And for the most part, I don't watch the mainstream media anymore. I come to you guys. I come to that third party because you guys are telling the truth, or at least trying to get to the bottom of the truth.
Richard, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was thinking a couple of things. One was last year at the SCU conference, I got to meet Ross Colhart, and he did a really nice presentation. And people were asking that question, what's going on? Why is the media doing this? And basically, he said that he did an interview with Gary Nolan and on his show, and it got 3.2 million views. you know, and I was thinking the last time that happened was like, when during 9/11 or when Cronkite told everybody that President Kennedy had been assassinated. So I think that what you're saying, I personally don't watch the news anymore, and most people I talk to are basically they don't believe them. I had to, and I'm not going to say who it was, but recently I had an occasion to be with one of the individuals who's one of the primetime, news network guys on 6 o'clock news, and I was with him for a couple hours, and I was talking to him about my books, and he seemed quite interested in it, but he told me pretty blatantly, he goes, Richard, none of this stuff ever comes across my desk. And I think what you're dealing with is a lot of these network people, they come in the morning and they've got an agenda, somebody, they've got researchers and they go, okay, today we're going to go here and we're going to talk to these people about this and that. And, their day's pretty well planned out. And I think those individuals probably, they pretty much do whatever their feed is. And so if there's something going on, it's probably more on the network level where they're just saying, hey, don't talk about this or don't talk about that. But he was quite interested and surprised because I was really, going on about the history of it and all the research that I'd done and the UFO cases I worked on. And I mean, he just didn't seem to know very much about it, which surprised me.
Got it. Okay, Razmataz, hi. Do you think that the only way we'll have real disclosure is if one of our adversary goes first? Who wants to take that, or who has thoughts?
Well, I know that's one of the concerns that is that with disclosure, there's always the possibility if they don't at some point step up to the plate and deal with it, one of our foreign adversaries, the Russians or the Chinese, are going to jump in front of us and get in the spotlight and basically pull the trigger on it, and then it's going to make us look like we weren't on target or paying attention. Absolutely.
Lisa McNally, here's a question for the Tedesco, Dedesco. I can't spell very well. The Tedesco brothers, do they think that they are looking at UAP or drones?
Well, to us, it's all UAP because it's unidentified anomalous phenomena. So whether it's drones or it's something else, non-human intelligence or whatever, I mean, it's the same thing to us. We're just trying to figure out what's the source and its properties.
Right. And nobody at this point seems to have much of a clue other than, I mean, some of the stuff that they're saying, that the typical commercial traffic and that sort of thing. Yeah, there probably is a fair amount of commercial traffic out there, but there's also some observations that are being made by pretty credible people that you just can't simply dismiss.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just reports from the public, I mean, which are thousands. It was well over 5,000 reports just from the Northeast, and I know it was higher than that. But there was also the various sheriff's departments who are coordinated. Mm-hmm. They, like I said, they had their own drone units. They were doing it. They were doing the due diligence. There was state police that were doing it. They were actually going up in helicopters and making close proximity observations of these things. And there's other agencies involved. It's yeah, you can't just score that off on a scrap heap.
Understood. Okay, Andy Two Dogs, always a great show, Matt. Thank you for that compliment. Lisa McNally, do you think they are far too advanced to be man-made? What's being observed? Chris, what are your thoughts with what you saw firsthand in Nebraska?
Well, the one night that I saw the big light in the sky just going super, super fast, I'm pretty familiar with drones just from my military background. I'm not an expert on it, but the no noise, the size of the light, it just doesn't seem like we as a human species are at that level of technology. And some of the other things that were reported by other deputies in different counties, what they seen or what they took down, witness statements, that technology just doesn't seem like your man-made stuff. you know, like John and Gerry said, it's probably a mixture of stuff. It's probably drones and something of NHI. I just don't know, but I would like to figure out what it is.
Yeah, actually, and while I'm switching the show here, of course I hit the wrong button. But we had a couple stills from you and John and Gerry. What is that I forgot to show earlier? What are we looking at here?
Okay, so we were actually heading towards Robin Moses State Park. It was on the Fire Island National Seashore, and on the way we were seeing these objects. If you look to the left, one at the tree line and one above the tree line, these two lights. They're kind of bright. They were hovering in there for a long period of time, at least a half hour.
Wow.
Before fading out, disappearing.
Right. No stars, nothing like that. You know, we used
stellarium
mapping, and of course these things remain stationary while the rest of the constellations would do their thing. You know, the movement. So
it was just. And this was actually at Robin Moses State Park. What you're seeing to the left, to the left, is an aircraft, is an airliner, which we were tracking on radar, and of course there's some video compression issues because there's a cell phone camera. But to the right of it, you'll see an orb-like object that we couldn't track on radar. It was invisible to our radar.
Yeah,
wow.
And no thermal signature. You know.
This is an object that was we consider more drone-like. It was three lights that suddenly appeared in the sky and descended towards the water. They didn't flash. They just kind of it was three oval steady lights. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, great. Health plan, fantastic channel. Very much appreciate all who honestly add to the space. Really appreciate that compliment. Reality Check VIP, Tedesco brothers. What were your thoughts about the red-blue gravity shifts?
So you know, we had recently wrote that paper, and it's we had noticed over the period of 3 years that we were doing this research is that there was an interesting phenomenon around the lights themselves, these orbs, and they seem to have a kaleidoscope appearance to them. When we looked at it, you know, frame by frame, you could see that these objects, it wasn't just changing color, but there were specific colors. They were changing red and blue. You know, when the object would move away from you, it would redshift. And as the object moved towards you, whether it was rotating or just moving in your direction, it would blue shift. Then we started to see also some unusual activity with the propagation of our radar signals, the marine-based radar, which is 3 centimeter beam. They call it X-band, which is a small beam that they use on ships to determine weather conditions and biomass and all that other stuff. You know, so you know, this is the kind of thing that, you know, we were getting some odd returns, and these odd returns were a signal that would come back late, and a signal would come back late, but didn't lose any gain. It was the signal would come back at an amplitude that was very much in line with what was being transmitted.
It was the same energy level.
Yeah, that energy level didn't dissipate at all, which we would expect that to happen if it was coming back several seconds late.
And this is a phenomenon that's been called long delay echoes.
Right.
There's a delay in the return of the radar signal, which is something's causing that delay, and it usually occurred when one of these orb-like objects will be
within the line of sight.
It's in the line of sight.
Yeah. So we'd use a ship as a reference, a large ship out there. We'd bounce a radar signal off the ship, and if we saw these objects in the line of sight between the ship and the radome antenna, the scanner, we would look for these effects. And it was statistically significant because I would say 7 out of 10 times we get an interference pattern when these objects were in the line of sight of a ship, which is bizarre. And it's not just radar; it seems to be occurring with GPS signals as well
and LiDAR.
And LiDAR.
Yeah.
You know, so putting this all together, you know, we're kind of surmising that this may have more to do with gravitational lensing or gravidity type, you know, drive systems that these things are being that use its propulsion systems.
And we're using these 4 data points to
Right.
make that hypothesis, make that
connection,
case.
yeah.
Yeah.
Reality check VIP for the Tedesco brothers again. You ever use SDR software to try and listen to the RF
Yes.
signals?
Yes. So the problem with the SDR, we've talked to other engineers too that are out in the field using these SDR radios. The problem is the software-defined radio is that it doesn't seem to pick up these peak responses very well. They occur, they're almost like transients, and these transient pulses have to be picked up with a spectrum analyzer that is expensive enough to have a good, what they call a sample rate. So in order for it to see these very narrow occurring pulses or transients or spikes, you have to have something that has the resolution they call bandwidth resolution in order to determine that they're there. Well, I haven't seen them on an SDR radio.
Yeah, we're using a 26 gig, I think it's a
26 gig
spectrum analyzer. It's a high-end spectrum analyzer.
Yeah.
Greg Howe asks, again for the Tedesco brothers, are you going to work with Skywatch HQ headquarters to analyze their data that they've asked for on X?
Well, actually, Ross Coulthard had expressed Jake Barber had expressed an interest in talking with us. So Ross Coulthard had actually gave our information to Jake. So whenever he's ready to talk, and we're ready,
Yeah, we're open.
Awesome. Dave Smethurst asks, does the panel think craft have different functions, i.e. small surveillance drones and mastercraft, etc.? The signal frequencies reminded me of Skinwalker Ranch. So, I noticed that as well, Dave, close to that 1.6 gigahertz. The signal frequencies remind me of Skinwalker Ranch and imply communications between the craft. Gerry and John, will give that to you as well.
That we kind of suspect the same thing. We suspect that there are pilot signals out there, and they're generating, we believe they may be generating these signals in order to keep communication, I guess, between these objects, or even as a almost like a sense, a maintenance signal that lets them know if there's an aircraft in the area or something like that they can avoid. Something along those lines. There's nothing that we see that actually has a intelligence to it that looks like it's actually doing any kind of controls. It looks more and more or less like a pilot, like something that's just sending out a signal, and the signal is sufficient in amplitude too, to give some kind of an indication whether it's receiving it from other objects or it's bouncing it in some way, which it's using for some kind of maybe some kind of detection, periphery to detection of some sort,
like some kind of clock pulse, and to network these maybe to network these.
Well, possibly to network the objects together. Who knows?
Understood. Dominic also asks you guys, to John and Gerry, are they aware that our research from University on Ukraine regarding fast objects flying in the sky, they use very fast cameras? I don't know, does that make sense?
Yes. As a matter of fact, Avi Loeb had looked into that, and he kind of challenged it. He challenged their observations. After experiencing what we've experienced out there, I'm not about to challenge their observations. I think there's something to it.
Yeah, we got to talk to them directly,
and that's something that it seems to agree with what we're seeing as far as dark objects. There are objects that are dark. You just don't see them.
Yeah, we'll be more satisfied if we talk to them directly.
Understood. Okay, great. Yeah, so that's it for the questions. Sean, I'll hand it back over to you to kind of wrap all of this up.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your participation on this panel today. Just to summarize, Chris is our proxy for our public safety. You're a direct witness to the incursions in 2019-2020. You have some very sensational and anomalous descriptions that you've provided, not information that you've gotten from anyone else, but you yourself, you were there. You were also part of the investigation to gather up witnesses and to work with our local, county, state, and federal partners to get an idea of what this is. And to date, we still don't have the answers that we're looking for, but we do appreciate the effort that you've put into this. Richard, your long history of investigations with the federal government and your participation on this panel to help educate the public as to the history of reports as it relates to UAP and separating UAP from drones and what we need to do strategically to protect anyone that is conducting these investigations. We appreciate your support and your knowledge as we engage in future endeavors to understand and respond appropriately to this. John and Gerry, your technical expertise is priceless. We need to replicate what you're doing. We will support you in every way that we can, and we ask for the public support in reaching out to our elected officials to allocate funding for all facets of investigators and other personnel that we would call on to really get an understanding of this. It is a concern that a statement is being made that this is not a public safety hazard, and all of these incursions or drone operations have been approved. Yet we have people that are reporting some level of disability or disablement. We have vehicles that have not been working properly, and we have concerns from our public citizens as to what is happening and the lack of accountability. So if you want to continue this discussion, please go to uapdisclosurefund.org /public safety. We will continue this discussion, and we will continue to add resources so that if you'd like to contribute, we need all hands in our nation and around the world to understand this. So Matt, thank you again for having me as your co-host on the show, and I will turn it back to you.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone. This has really been a great show. I've got some thoughts I'll share here in a minute after we sign off here with you guys. But yeah, Sean, really great job. I thought the questions were really on point. Richard, again, thank you for coming on. And
thank you.
And are there any plans for future books along this same vein as far as UAP and first responders?
Well, right now I'm working on a book that's basically a culmination of cases. These times when I go out and speak and sell my books, everybody's like, well, what about cases? Can you give us some information on cases? So I'm working on a book right now, about halfway through it, and it's a culmination of maybe 25 short stories, and they're all about cases I've worked on, but they're told from the perspective of the person and what they experienced and what they were feeling, and not like investigation reports, the kind of thing where somebody would tell you while you're sitting across the dinner table, I was on my way home and this happened and da-da-da. But that's the next thing in my world.
Gerry and John Tedesco. What's next for the Nightcrawler research efforts?
Well, we're working on a third paper, as we mentioned, a radio spectroscopy paper, so you can specifically identify based on lighting systems these objects, because use the spectral signatures. The other thing is, if we get funding, I mean, we can take this in another direction and actually start investigating USOs. We would retrofit a probably a mini yacht with the same kinds of equipment, with a 360-degree sonar, and using an ROV, underwater ROV, or a big dinghy. Otherwise, we're stuck with a dinghy with what we can manage on there.
So we're going to call this one the water crawler or something like that, right?
Yeah, really.
That'll work. Water crawler.
Yeah.
I love that. And Chris, what's next for you? Or do you expect to see any more drones out in the Nebraska area?
Anything's possible, but I left law enforcement in December to do a private contracting job overseas. So probably be leaving the country in the next couple months.
Well, absolutely stay safe. And then finally, Sean, what's next for you?
I I also retired in December and am ramping up my work with the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. The Intention Study team has done some great work studying similar incursions at military atomic warfare facilities dating back from 1945 to 1975, and we're continuing that work to identify patterns that relate to the current incursions that we're seeing today. What we're trying to do is understand the signatures that are being documented by our best scientists to develop an understanding as to what kind of control system that is being used, whether it's a chemical control system, some sort of gravity manipulation, or something else. So these are very novel ideas, at least to us, but there's a lot of research that is going to be required. And so that's what I'm going to be spending my time doing in the near future.
Fantastic. And again, we'll put the link up for the UAP Disclosure Fund. Folks, yeah, definitely check that out. This public safety task force group, whatever you guys are really added a lot to the conversation, and we definitely appreciate you coming on, spending your Sunday here, and sharing your thoughts on this drone thing, which I can tell you are definitely not FAA approved drones. So everyone, thanks for joining us, and have a fantastic Sunday.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks,
Okay, great.
Matt.
Awesome.
Bye-bye, guys. Have a good night.
Okay. All right. Great. Let's see here. Yeah, it's well, I turned everybody's audio off here so we don't hear anything. Yeah, you know, it blows me away that this sort of gaslighting from multiple administrations is continuing. Now, I'm trying to give the Trump administration the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps some bad information was fed up the chain to the White House, to the president. And we know that there is a long history of the Pentagon, of the National Security Council lying or hiding things from current presidents. We know that there are presidents that were never read into this, or were maybe possibly only partially read into the program. We had heard very early on that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and members of the National Security Council decided not to brief President Biden back when he was in power. We had heard this about, I'd say probably about a year before the election, that kind of mentally he was not doing well, and that this whole knowledge would be maybe a bridge too far. Now, I don't know if that changed following all the Chinese balloons, balloon gate, all that kind of stuff. But there is a very long history of the deep state, if you want to call it that, these deputy level folks that are spread all throughout government, these career folks, these senior executive service folks, and certain members of military leadership that just want to keep everybody in the dark. And it just, I cannot think really of a more un-American thing than to have the federal government gaslight law enforcement, to gaslight our first responders. It's really just it's unconscionable. We're not idiots. And I dare say the folks, our first responders that have worked in government or for city governments for a long time, they know when they're being lied to. And it has been crystal clear that the federal government has been lying to our first responders. It is crystal clear that the federal government has been lying to local and state officials when it comes to all of this, to the UAP issue, the gaslighting with the drones, all of that stuff. None of us are that idiotic, that ill-informed to think that all of these hundreds upon hundreds of reports were were all just FAA approved drones. Now, certainly there were a lot of things that I'm quite certain were misidentifications, either planets or prosaic drones or whatnot. But there is a large subset of this stuff that these are not from here. I guarantee it. The fact that drones in, what was it, 2023, December 2023 going into 2024, were operating with impunity over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. And I want to remind everybody that Langley Air Force Base, that is the Air Force Base that is part of U.S. Northcom, that is responsible for the defense, the air defense of the capital region. So you're telling me that hobbyist drones, I guess the hobbyists were just coming out in just in full force, flying their drones over one of our nation's most important air bases, so much so that the United States Air Force had to relocate an entire wing of F-22 fighters, that are responsible for protecting the restricted airspace over Washington. These hobbyist drones, are these hobbyists showing up in force, flying drones for over a month over Langley Air Force Base. These hobbyist drones that the military police at Langley Air Force Base had absolutely no luck in downing any of these things with their electronic warfare weapons. You know, the White House wants you to think that all of that were nothing but Joe Blow with his DJI drone running him above one of our nation's most important Air Force bases. Folks, it absolutely makes zero sense. It in many ways, if this thing weren't such a serious national security issue, it's almost comical that you have a White House, this Trump administration and the previous administration, that is gaslighting Americans, that is gaslighting state officials, that is gaslighting local officials, that is gaslighting first responders about these drones. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And we know that there is a history of these these airborne vehicles of unknown origin from physically hurting people, either through some kind of radiation exposure or both Richard, I think it was Richard, spoke about some of the health effects from people getting too close to these things. Dr. Gary Nolan of Stanford University has spoken extensively on damage that has been observed to people's brains through MRI studies. People from the intelligence community or other government agencies that have gotten close to UAP and sustained physical injury. So you have to ask yourself, well, who is our federal government really working for? Are they working for the American people? Are they working to protect our first responders? Are they working for the American people to be truthful about the dangers of these things? Because if you ask me, it sure seems that they are not. It sure seems, and I think it's just blatantly obvious that they are gaslighting all of us. They are not being truthful with the American public. They are not being truthful with local and state officials. And frankly, it's I can sort of see where maybe the federal government would say on the down low or some classification level as confidential, conversations with local and state officials saying, hey folks, this is what's really going on. We don't want to cause any sort of panic within the public. But I can tell you that the folks that we've spoke to, local and state government officials, they weren't being told any lick of truth. And the frustration from these local and state officials, you could just tell was palpable because they knew the federal government was lying to their faces and treating them like I don't know, like I don't know what the issue is there, but treating them like they don't need to know this information. And I think that's really kind of one of the biggest tragedies of all of this. There is such mistrust in the government. It's been that way for quite some time. There is, such skepticism towards the mainstream media in terms of being truthful. I mean, we have seen time and time again articles by one particular reporter in the New York Times that is clearly, this guy is just parroting propaganda that is being given to him from the Pentagon. There's one well-known reporter that, guess what? He's on CIA payroll. I know exactly who this guy is. And when one of the sources in the intelligence community told me about this individual and that he's on the payroll, and then I went and looked at all of these this individual's sort of appearances on places like CNN and others, and articles this individual has printed. This guy that is getting paid by the CIA. It all made sense. It's like, that's why you're shoveling all of this BS, because you're lining your pocket. You don't have a democracy when you have this sort of a free press that is supposed to be free and independent, doing the bidding of their handlers in the intelligence community or in the Pentagon. We saw this time and time again with the Pentagon Public Affairs Officer Susan Go, who would, in the previous administration, hold press conferences, private press conferences with select members of the media. Guess who was frozen out? Chris Sharp of the Liberation Times. Guess who else was frozen out? Ross Coulthart of News Nation. Guess who was not frozen out? The New York Times, Julian Barnes, and some folks. I think another guy from Wall Street, the Wall Street Journal. It is obvious because you'll see these guys like Julian Barnes put out just absolute journalistic garbage that wouldn't even be worth putting in the National Enquirer. I mean, just it is. I don't even know how this guy looks at himself in the mirror when what you read coming from Julian Barnes out of the New York Times is. I mean, it's clear. It's propaganda. It is clear that this guy is towing the line for the Pentagon, and so these folks from the mainstream media that continue to really just parrot propaganda by the Pentagon, by the intelligence community, it erodes trust in our free press. And when all of this comes out, and it is going to come out, we know that it nearly came out during the Church Committee back in the early 1970s when they discovered that, oh, guess what? The CIA had been paying or compensating hundreds of reporters in the American media, including editors, heads of networks. The CIA was either paying them directly, paying them through a cutout, or it was a quid pro quo. In other words, if you're Julian Barnes at the New York Times, if you want to get this exclusive interview with the Secretary of Defense, guess what? We need you to write an article for the New York Times about UAP. Here are the talking points we would love for you to write about in the New York Times. Wink, wink, and lo and behold, you played ball, so you're going to get that nice interview with the Secretary of Defense. This is the kind of deal making that happens, and this is the kind of cancer that is present in our mainstream media. It is no wonder that mainstream media is falling on its face. It is no wonder that people are turning to our show and others, and Ross Coulthart and Christopher Sharp of the Liberation Times and George Knapp and others to to tell them the truth, because the mainstream media is not. All of us that are for the truth, we have no idea where this stuff is from. I couldn't tell you. I wish I knew. But we're going to be honest about it. We're going to tell you when we don't know something. Versus this current administration, which is gaslighting, or perhaps, hopefully, just has bad information that was given to them about the drones. But you have to really take it with a grain of salt what the mainstream media is telling you, and then also what they are failing to tell you and what they are ignoring. It doesn't matter what administration, if it's Republican or Democrat. It's beyond party. This stuff is going on all the time. It has gone on for a very long time. And, and again, you have to ask yourself, do they think these folks in government that are part of this deep state? I used to make fun of Trump and his deep state stuff all the time. I'm a Democrat, but lo and behold, he was right about it. It is true. And you have these folks that are doing everything to kind of undermine all of us in terms of learning what is truly going on. It transcends politics. It is the deputy level folks in DOD and IC and elsewhere in these different nodes of the government that are hiding this, that are propagating this. And I want to be specific. Not everyone in the government is guilty of this. There are good people in the Pentagon. There are good people in the intelligence community, in the CIA, in the NSA, in the Department of Energy that do want to do the right thing. They know that this lie that has been going on for 70, 80 years or longer, it's time that it comes to an end. So I know that often on this show, when I'm sort of speaking extemporaneously, not off of notes or anything, I sometimes make that mistake of kind of throwing everybody into that bucket. But there are people in government that are trying to do the right thing, and they know that this that it's time to level with the American people and the world. And my message to the Trump administration, to President Trump or Don Jr. or whoever is hopefully watching this show, is you have a unique opportunity to do what no former president has done, which is to declassify the stuff that sits under presidential emergency action directives under the NSC. President Trump, you have the unilateral authority to declassify anything that is in the National Security Council, that is under presidential emergency action directives, that are not anything that's classed in DOE. Anything that is under National Security Council, which half of this stuff is classified, the UAP drone stuff, the Havana syndrome stuff, all of that stuff sits under NSC. They're the ones that are the classification authority. They are the ones, anything that is classified that is a White House SAP, that is a White House Special Access Program that sits in the National Security Council, no one in Congress has the legal authority to view it. Absolutely none. That is why they take things like UAP and they stuff it in the NSC. The NSC has the legal authority to lock it down and keep it away from Congress. So all of this stuff that's going on, these billions upon billions of dollars that the Pentagon is kind of squirreling away, hiding it, hiding what they are spending and where they are spending it. That's how they do it. All this stuff stuffed in the NSC or under the Department of Energy under transclassified foreign nuclear information. That's how they hide this stuff from Congress. Congress cannot do its job of oversight, of fiscal oversight of what is going on with this government when all of this stuff, billions of dollars, is being squirreled away under waived special access programs or waived unacknowledged special access programs. That's stuffed into the National Security Council. That's how they hide this stuff. That's how they are taking your tax dollars, your hard-earned tax dollars, all of you who, like most Americans, are having a hell of a hard time making ends meet, having a hell of a hard time putting food on the table. All of this pork spending that is, you have this $50,000 hammer or whatever it is from a Boeing Aircraft Company, or a $10,000 bolt. I guarantee you 95% of the cost of those parts goes to some special access program that is off the books. So that $50,000 hammer, we'll just say $49,000 is going into the back pocket of some special access program that the Pentagon does not want Congress or the American public to know about. So you want to know why the Pentagon continues to fail every audit. You want to know why the Pentagon can apparently not account. I think it's either 50 or 60%. It's somewhere right at the halfway mark. The Pentagon cannot account for physical assets. They don't know where stuff is. You got to be kidding me. 50 to 60%, they cannot figure out where it's at. And which makes you wonder if the Pentagon and the IC has been lying to all of us about the UAP issue, about the drone issue, and who knows what else. That would explain, money doesn't grow on trees. Money comes from you, the taxpayer, and it gets funneled into areas that you don't know about, and Congress doesn't either. I certainly hope this new commission or task force by Representative Anna Paulina Luna, we are very, very supportive of this. We think this is a good move, but I am hopeful that the chair of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, will be very generous in issuing subpoenas to folks that have worked this topic, people that have maybe supervised the Office of Global Access and the CIA and other programs that are run under the CIA Directorate of Science and Technology. I certainly hope that Congressman Comer will, at the encouragement by Anna Paulina Luna, subpoena a bunch of folks and bring them in and put them in front of the committee and ask them under oath very, very specific questions. Because the minute you bring these folks and you don't ask them under oath, and you don't bring the right people in, who you bring in someone that does have plausible deniability, they can claim that they don't know anything, and it is important. You can't bring these people in and trust that they are going to tell you the truth. There has to be a legal mechanism under the threat of perjury to sort of what's the word? Just to really force them to speak the truth. You can't just bring them in and expect them to be honest. I've been told that in the security classification guides of most special access programs, it tells them specifically, if you are caught or something happens, this is the lie that you are to say. It's in a playbook. It's in a freaking binder. If you get called to testify in front of Congress and you're not under oath, this is how you explain away this special access program. This is the gamesmanship that they have to make sure that members of Congress do not find out what the truth is. So Congress, you cannot do your job unless your legislation has enforcement mechanisms, unless your legislation has teeth, unless your legislation has the ability to hold these people to account. Because guess what? For 80 years, They have had all this time to perfect their game. They have had all of these years to perfect this shell game that they are playing with Congress and the American public. And until we demand answers, it's going to be more of the same. And my message to all of the Republicans out there, especially the MAGA Republicans, you have a seat at the table with this administration. You are the ones that got Trump elected. You have a voice. And you can say to this administration, President Trump, we love you, we voted for you, but you promised us the truth. And we know that you are not being straight with us about this whole drone thing. All of the MAGA folks, you have a unique opportunity to have a conversation with a president who is, frankly, seems a little more open to listening to his supporters than some of the folks in some of the presidents in previous administrations. Take advantage of that. Tell this administration that you want the truth. I know for a fact Don Jr. is very much for this. Don Jr., RFK, these folks are proponents of getting this stuff out. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he was fully read into this, into the Deep Legacy program during the last Trump administration. He knows everything. He knows everything. Marco Rubio knows everything. So the other folks that are in the Trump administration, John Ratcliffe and others, they all know. They were all read in. So, President Trump, you have a unique opportunity. You have people that are your main proponents, that are the main folks on your team that feel that this needs to come out. And again, President Trump, I used to think your stuff about the deep state was a load of BS, but it's not. And there is no better demonstration, there's no better way of proving your whole thing about the deep state than the UAP drone issue. You declassify that stuff that's in the NSC, that you have the legal authority to unilaterally do. You will prove to the world and to the American public that what you have been saying about this deep state stuff is actually true. It is your political get out of jail card free if, well, I'm not going to elaborate any more on that, but you have this opportunity to make your case and show that there is proof in the pudding. So there you go. So again, folks, if you are, if you are a MAGA person and been active in this president's re-election campaign, let these folks know, let the administration know that you deserve to know the truth. The American people deserve to know the truth. This transcends party. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, or anything in between. We are all Americans. We all love our country. We all deserve the truth. We all deserve to know what information we need to know to protect our families, to protect the health and safety of our first responders. We all deserve our elected government officials in state and city deserve to know the truth. Let them know that. Let them know that. Because we, as Lou Elizondo, I believe, said, we can handle the truth. We are ready for it. So folks, really appreciate everyone hanging out for the show. If you like this show, we always do appreciate a thumbs up and a subscribe, and then also leave a comment. And right after this video, one of our other shows is going to play. We would love for you to sit around or stick around and watch it. That is actually one of the biggest things that YouTube looks for, is after this show ends, if you stick around to watch the next show from the Good Trouble Show. They love that, and that helps promote our channel organically to other folks. So thanks again for joining us. And right over here is going to be the next video that will show up from the Good Trouble Show. Tell your friends about us, and tell your elected officials that it is time for the truth. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you very soon with some more great interviews from the Good Trouble Show.